So now we really get to the good stuff, the physiology behind all this, and it's how hormones are going to control the calcium deposition in blood and control the blood calcium levels, which is very critical for the operation of the body. We haven't going to cover that entirely, but you should understand calcium is incredibly important to many, many activities in the body. And obviously bones are where it's kept at. So the bones are the major reservoir. We're going to store excess calcium in the bones. We're going to remove calcium when we need it and put it into the blood. Now, what are some of those important components, important features that calcium performs? Well, you can't have nervous system conduction without it. You can't have a heartbeat without it. There are so many things. You can't have clotting without it. So calcium is a great activator within the body. Also, you can have muscle contractions without it, right? So all of these features that require calcium in order to function, most enzymes or many enzymes require calcium. Let's look at calcium's importance in the bone. And of course, calcium makes up about 39% of the bone. That's quite an astounding amount that is just pure calcium. Other minerals and components you can see here. And so in as we've already mentioned, inorganic, we have about 67% makes up the bone, inorganic compounds, and only about a third of bone is organic, which is mostly the collagen and, of course, the cells. Hypocalcemia is when you have too low of blood calcium levels, and is a very, very critical problem that people may face. What are some of the outcomes of hypocalcemia? You can see them listed there. Vitamin D deficiency, right? Diarrhea, pregnancy, lactation can be issues that are associated with hypocalcemia. It can occur due to removal of parathyroid glands. We're going to see why that's so critical here in just a second. So calcium homeostasis, or the maintenance of a somewhat regular blood calcium level in the blood, is controlled by three hormones. Calcitriol isn't truly a hormone, but we'll call it one anyway. Calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. Calcitriol is a type of vitamin D that forms after activation by the kidneys and liver. So we have calciferol that's in the skin. Sunlight, UV, will convert that into vitamin D3. The vitamin D3 then goes on to the liver and kidneys and gets converted into calcitriol. Calcitriol acts like a hormone, and it does raise blood calcium concentration. How does it do that is the next slide. Whenever you have softness of bones, rickets that we saw a picture of in an earlier video, in adults you have low bone formation, bone repair capability called osteomalacia. You don't have adequate vitamin D, you aren't getting enough sun. So calcitriol acts to do several things in conjunction with parathyroid hormone, or PTH, that is released from a set of glands that are located on the posterior surface of your thyroid gland, which is right in this region right here, your thyroid. And so on the posterior surface, there are going to be typically four small ovals of tissue that don't really have any affiliation with the thyroid, other than the fact there's a ton of blood vessels that course through the thyroid and are found near the parathyroid glands. So the parathyroid glands are there to monitor blood calcium levels. And what they will do is they'll release their hormone when blood calcium level is too low. So you got to think about, well, what do I want to happen in the bones in order to cause an increased amount of calcium? I want my osteoclast to create more of those degradative enzymes, as well as some acidic secretions to chew away bone and thus release calcium into the blood vessels that are found around bone tissue. Now, in conjunction with calcitriol, We're going to work on the kidneys to decrease the amount of calcium that's released in the urine, to increase the amount of absorption by the digestive system, and then we are going to work with calcitonin. So it's a balance of parathyroid hormone and calcitriol in opposition to calcitonin, okay, that's going to regulate blood calcium levels. So calcitonin can be abbreviated as CT. That doesn't mean connective tissue in this case. It's kind of aloha, right? Aloha means goodbye or hello. It just depends on the context, right? So you have to remember what the context is. If we're talking about blood calcium levels and we use CT, we're going to be talking about calcitonin, not connective tissue. So calcitonin is directly secreted by the thyroid gland. Its job is to be released when calcium levels are too high or you are hypercalcemic. Now I'll go ahead and mention that this is very rare in an adult. Does not happen as a normal course of events. So what calcitonin will do is will inhibit the activity of osteoclast and activate the activity of osteoblast. And so what happens is you get this absorption of calcium into the bone, and so calcitonin increases the likelihood of bone formation and decreases blood calcium levels. This is a nice little map of calcium homeostasis that we can see. We have our blood calcium levels, of which the typical value is shown here. When you have calcium removed, you have too high a calcium, let's say it's getting up or past the 10.4 milligrams per deciliter, then you're going to have osteoblasts deposit calcium into the bone. Calcitonin will act on the osteoblast, and it will also inhibit osteoclast. Now, if we need to increase the calcium level, then we will increase the actions of PTH, and osteoclast will break down bone and increase this level. All right. And we have our secondary effects over here to the left, where we have the actions on the organs. Now, before we continue, calcitonin is very important in children, but not in adults, because as I mentioned, hypercalcemia is very rare in adults. So it's not often that we're going to have too much calcium. What is quite common in adults is too little calcium in the blood. So PTH and calcitriol are very important. They are also important in childhood. But you can have your thyroid removed as an adult, which takes away the calcitonin, and you'll be perfectly fine. What you cannot do is also pull out those parathyroids at the same time. They used to do this, and they noticed that people died rather quickly after the removal of the parathyroids, and they discovered, hey, we need to leave them in. And so they will leave parathyroid glands within the body even after removal or radioactive poisoning of the thyroid gland. Now, what are some effects of this movement of calcium levels in the bones? You can end up with a condition called osteopenia. This is just a somewhat accepted occurrence, and at least in women, also will occur in men, where bones become thinner and weaker with age. Certainly has some relationship to levels of estrogen. This can begin as early as the mid-30s, quite surprising. And from that point on, women lose 8% of their bone per decade, men 3%. And again, this has to do with the changes in estrogen primarily that women see as they hit around 45 to 50 years of age and enter menopause. The most profoundly affected bones by osteopenia are the ends of the bones, the vertebrae, and the jaws. This can certainly continue and become a full-blown case, an issue called osteoporosis, which is a severe bone loss. This affects normal function of the bones. You can get the dowager's hump, where you have the backbone and the other bones that have become so brittle and aged that you can't properly support your back anymore. Over the age of 45, about almost 30% of women will have osteoporosis, and 18% of men. So it does also affect men to a fairly large degree as well. This is a great shot of what osteoporosis largely affects, and that's the trabeculae of the spongy bone, not the compact bone that you might expect. Remember, it's osteopenia has a profound effect in the epiphyses. So we see this here on the right side with the trabeculae getting those pits in them and becoming weaker. Aging sucks, but it's better than the alternative, but it obviously has a very deleterious effect on bone tissue, and primarily, again, because of that estrogen drop as menopause onsets. Bone mass and overall decrease will occur in bone mass. You will have remember how we talked about the balance that it must occur between clast and blast, that it must be fairly even for your bones to be very healthy. But when the clast begin outpacing and breaking down bone quicker than the blast can form it, you're going to have a net breakdown of bone. And because females have generally smaller bones than males, that's why osteoporosis affects them much more significantly than males. And just in general, old age is going to have a much greater effect on females.